In Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, the PC-12 NGX is more than just a plane. It's a flying computer. But even the best computer is useless if you don't know how to turn it on and talk to it. Today we are mastering the office. We're going from a cold dark cockpit to a running 1200 horsepower turbine. We'll break down the 4 massive displays of the Honeywell A system and walk to the start sequence that makes the NGX the most advanced single-engine turboprop in a sim. Welcome in the cockpit of the Pilatus PC-12 NGX. As you can see, currently the aircraft is completely shut down. We can see some plugs over here, we can see the yoke over here, we can see the displays, a lot of buttons, but also on the top we can see some switches. And on the right side we also see some plugs and also some specific buttons. Some of these buttons, like these ones, are unique for each side, so keep that in mind. And if we look here, we can see the throttle and the flap settings. But let's first start the aircraft a bit, right? Because that talks easier. And then I will also show you how you can use these smart camera options, which are in Flight Simulator 2024. To start the aircraft, it would be nice if you had a checklist. Well, luckily enough, that's available. If you press the aircraft icon, like I already did, and then press the checklist, you will see a checklist which is divided in the pre-flight, the in-flight, and the post-flight. If you compare this with the official checklist from the PC-12 NGX, this one is a little bit shorter, to be honest, but it still contains a lot of additional steps and a lot of interesting things which you can look at. So this is the external side, right? This is the external inspection. That's where you need to start. And to do that, we're going to press Shift-C because we're now outside of the aircraft, and then we can have a look at a lot of things. So first of all, we remove the chocks. We can connect an external power unit if you want. If you want that, you need to request it via the ATC, and that can be done via this button. And then if you're lucky and the EFB isn't in the way, you can see this. But hey, you can see that the ATC is switched off because the aircraft doesn't have power. That makes it a little bit difficult. I would say also looked at the other sections, but you won't find it here. The only workaround for you, if you own a GSX, which is a third-party add-on, which you can see here, then you can request a power unit. So let me do that while I'm talking. If you want to use this in Flight Simulator 2024 without the GSX plugin, what you always can do is, I would say, put on the batteries and then switch it on. You can see that I still need to update GSX, but for now we can still use it. So we're going to request additional service in this case, and we're going to request a GPU, which is a ground power unit. So let's do that, and we will, I would say Avianca, right, or Avia partner, that's also fine. And then I would say, truck drives to the fans, and then hopefully it connects it to our aircraft. Let's see if that happens, and also we will see later on. Right, let me go back to the checklist. We can see the powered truck over here. And then we're going to go to the rudder, right? The rudder, as you have seen in the first part, or it's the first part of this video, right? In the first part or video of the series, is on the back. And the back, you can simply look at it. But the nice thing is that if you also click on it, you can kind of inspect it. And in some cases, you can move it around. It says here, do not push. So likely it doesn't want us to push it. So let's keep it as is. Then we got the elevator, which is on top, which we also can inspect. In some cases, you will see that the green marker appears, right? That says, okay, hey, you did it correctly. And then, of course, we got the right flap. And that for that part, we need to move to the wings, which are over here. And we can, inspect it. There's nothing more you can do. In some cases, it says that you need to shake, like with the aileron. We need to shake it. Well, let's do that. With the other ones, they're over here, if I'm correct. Let me double check. You can always press the eye icon, which shows you where you are. And then we can, press this nice option, if we're lucky. And here you can see that I can move it around. So I can simply make sure that it moves. Then the PDOT cover, that's one on the left and right side. Normally it's over here, but I already removed it. The nice thing is that it also will remove it on the other side. So let me mark it as, finished. And then we're gonna look at the view. And the view is a little bit hard to see, but that's the ones over here, right? So we simply say, okay, hey, it's secure. And then we're going to connect with the right tires, etc. In the meantime, you can see that the, let's say, GPU has driven to our wing. So not really nice, but hey, that's likely will be fixed in a future version of, in this case, the GSX plugin. Then the engine covers, I also removed those already. And then we can look at the gear in the front. You can see it's pretty extensive, this list, right? The engine, check the visuals. And the engine, you can open it on the other side. Let me do that. If we move over here, you can open it. Like I also showed you in the previous video, you can have a look at it and then say, hey, everything is good, and you can close it. Of course, the left tire and all the other things are simply, let's say, going to the tire and going to the other sides, like the aileron and the left flap. Let's also do that. And then we can enter the aircraft, because then we're into the before starting the engine one. This is likely something which you can follow yourself, right? Not super new, but you can always, would say, maybe learn something if you watch somebody else doing it. The doors are over here, right? That's the cargo door, but in front of the wing, if we move around, you can see that there's also a door over here. It might be a little bit hidden, but if we press the option here, you can open the door, and it's a really small button that you need to watch out. And then you can enter the cockpit, and we're currently completing with the pre-flight check. So this is where we come with the next checklist. And the next checklist is the, I would say, before starting the engine. What you will see in the real checklist from the real aircraft is that it divides it into multiple sections normally. Normally it's the empennage pre-flight check. Then we've got the right wing trailing, the right wing leading. You get the nose section, then the other nose section, then the left wing leading edge, and then the left wing trailing edge. And then you are in the cabin, right, where you need to make sure that the cabin is loaded, the hand luggage is stowed, passenger doors closed, etc. Once we've done that, right, we're into the cockpit itself, where we can do a lot of things. So the official checklist, if I count the items correctly, are 32 items. As you can see over here, it's 8. In some cases, you can set it to more items by changing the level. In this case, for this aircraft, there are only 8. So don't search for something because it's not there. Simply say, I'm not sure why they didn't model it. Maybe it didn't make sense. Not sure. In some cases, for example, the circuit breakers, does it make sense to add them here? I don't think so, but you can still do that. So most of the systems can be found on the top, at least those who are, say, need to be controlled the first part of this section. So I'm going to move this one to small because then it's easier for you to see it. So we're going back to the checklist, and the master buses are over here. It has 2 buses, AV1 and AV2. So these are the buses, and you can see that there are also some other things, like the master power is there, some other things are there, like for example the batteries, but also the lights are there. And with this we simply completed the first step. Parking brake. The parking brake can be found over here. It's also set, and that's next to the yoke, right? So super handy. Then the standby power, we can also move it, and then we can switch it to on. And then you will hear all kind of sounds. That's good, because if you hear sounds, then you know that something is happening. And after that, you can switch on the EPS, and the EPS can be found, say, pretty close. I'm sure I'm pretty close. It's over here. You first need to set it to test, then the test light illuminates, and then you need to move it to ARM, and that will, let's say, in most cases will switch on the EPS on. However, I also figured out that it doesn't always happen. Once that has happened, you can of course switch on the batteries, battery 1 and battery 2, and if available you can switch on the external power. For some reason, let's say it's not mentioned in this manual. There is a warning about the bottom section about the lights, which is not in the let's say in the flight simulator checklist, but it is in the official manual, where it says that you need to watch out, because if you're turning on too much light, it might drain your battery too much, and then you can't start the engines. Now to the interesting section, right? These are the displays, and these are the displays where we need to check the gear. The gear is over here, all 3 are green, and we can check the fuel quantity, which is over here, also fine. So now you would say, hey, let's start the engines, but first do some other things because we're not there yet. Let me reset the view, let me hide the EFB, and let's see how those instruments work, because that's likely what you want to know. If you press Shift 1, you will focus on the PFD, the primary flight display. It contains a lot of information. First of all, it contains the speed, but it also contains your altitude, the barometer settings, it contains your ground speed, it contains the satellite, the temperature, the RMP, it contains also the, I would say, vertical horizon, although it's not completely shown here, but it also contains some interactive things. For example, if I press overlay, which simply is overlay, then I can switch on, for example, the weather, the tools, or I can set to off. There's a warning in the manual, and likely that won't happen with Flight Simulator 2024, but you shouldn't switch on the weather radar because it's dangerous, and if you're very close to buildings, it will not work perfectly and you can damage things. So watch out that you're not switching it on. The tools is the traffic avoidance weighing system, by the way, and will also not have, I would say, a lot of the benefit currently. The LX, that's the one which doesn't work for some reason, but the surface brightness, you can see that if I press it, you can see that it shows me this. Kind of weird, right? Because if we would look outside, you would see something different, but hey, this is what it is. You can also leave it like it currently shows. That's the default setting. If we move a little bit to the left side, we can see the torque PSI, the ITT, right? That's the temperature. We can see the oil temperature and pressure. We can see the NG. We can see the RPMs, the temperature, and the LB per hour, right? That's also an interesting setting, which we will cover later on. Besides that, there are some buttons on the right side. Those buttons can be used to manipulate the navigation. If I press it, you will see that the navigation selection changed from log 1 to log 2 to FMS. In most cases, you will fly using the FMS, except when, for example, landing, then you might want to change to the log. In addition to that, you've got the nav preview. The nav preview allows you to show a line, I would say, where your next nav aid is. So you can see that if I switch it on, it points me to log 1, log 2, and then off. Those are the only options. In addition to that, what you can do is you can set other things. You can, for example, set the FMS as well as the other FMS, which makes it possible to show two arrows. Currently you don't see it, but once we're airborne you will see those differences, and you can also hide it. HSI, that influences this part. Do I want to have the full circle? Do I want to have half the circle? Those are the only two options which you currently have. And then the ET, as far as I figured out, it doesn't work or it doesn't do anything. Then we've got the course button, which you can use, right? Which you can change. You can also change it. You can see it change here, right? You can change the range to say come closer or go further away. And this one, well, we will cover it later on because it doesn't show a lot currently. Then moving back to the right bottom part, that's where we see the communication radios, the navigation radios, DMA1, DMA2, the ADF, and the transponder, as you can see. Also, those can be manipulated or managed by using another method. However, these are also, let's say, pushable, right? So I can say, hey, I want to change the transponder to standby, alt, or any other mode. For COM, you can use it to change the frequencies. At least that's what I thought, but it doesn't work yet. But maybe it does do something. So likely it changes the active to the passive and vice versa. We can do it like here. Yeah. So it changes active to passive. So we just learned something new. In addition to that, you can see the other things, right? You can press the ident option. You can press the VFR option. If you press ident, you will see that the transponder changes. If you fly VFR, you're normally using 7000. But if you're flying, of course, IFR, you need to watch out by not pressing these buttons, because then you will get, I would say, a mad ATC behind you. Then if we look at the DME, this is where we can switch on the DME pair, the DME hold, the DME pair 2, and you can switch on or off options. I tried playing around with this, but to be honest, I didn't see too much differences, but that might be me. The only thing which I observed was that there was the letter H, but nothing else. If we press the detail option, we can say switch between navigation modes. We can say bearing and to red. And we also can go to the DME detail page, which brings us back to, again, this DME button. And below that, we've got the volume to listen to the volume of the radio sequence and squad ID. And we have this nice button, which I will cover later on because it allows you to kind of switch the radios if you want, of course. PFD and HRS are not functioning as I figured out. Then if I press Shift 2, you will see that I will end up in this screen, which is currently entirely black, so we'll skip it for now. Because if I go downstairs or a little bit lower, not downstairs, you will see this display. And this display shows you the cache, right? It shows you the messages. Depending on the color of the message, simply means, hey, you need to look at something, or hey, you need to watch out for something. Here we've got the gears, we've got the flaps, we've got the fuel, we've got the quantity of fuel, we've got the end time of the flight, we've got the LB used, also interesting. You can always press reset and we'll simply reset it. And then we've coming to the environmental part where we can adjust the temperature. For example, we can check the temperature, cabin, cockpit and cabin temperature. We can change the destination elevation. We can set it to low cap. It will change to lower temperature if I'm correct. And then on the center part, we can see the generators, the batteries and their charges, and the ice protection which you switched on. Now on the right side, there's a complete checklist. And the checklist is pretty handy because it contains exactly the same checklist as we already went to by using the EFB. The only thing which it doesn't do is keep them in sync. So be aware of that. And it says, okay, checklist complete. And then you can say starting the engine and we'll continue with more things. If you made an error, you can always press reset, which will reset all of the sections. If I press Shift 4, I will focus on this part, but I first want to focus on this display because this display is also pretty interesting. First of all, the home button shows this. It shows the inhabits, so you can mute certain sounds. It shows you the direct to, which you can use to fly to a specific beacon, which is already part of your flight plan. You can, say, switch on the weather radar. You can switch on the tools, right, the traffic avoidance waiting system, and you can do something with the LX, but LX and WX, there's not much functionality attached to it as far as I figured out. Then we've got this display, and you might think, okay, what does this thing do? Well, that's also what I asked myself. To do that, I will need to zoom out a bit, because this allows you to kind of, well, between brackets, control your displays. So what we're going to do is with this one, if I say, hey, the upper MFD, you can press page. And then you will see the sub menu popping up where you can say, okay, I want to go to the sensors, for example. If I press it again, I can go to the weather. If I press it again, I can go to the avionics. And depending on the option you select, you can do certain things. So on the PFD, you can change the settings by using this, say, screen. You can see the version which is enabled. You can go to the FCS, enable certain things, right? The steep approach, enable the thrust director. You can go to miscellaneous where you can activate the keyboard pop-up, and the custom DB. So those are the things which you can change by using that button. By default, it's set to the checklist. Now you can also change the other parts, but what I figured out is that in most cases it doesn't result in a lot of things. I'm not sure if that's also the case in the real Pilatus, but this is what I figured out by testing this. Then we've got the communication radios, which we also can change via this method, the navigation radios, and the transponder code, which we can change here using, let's say, an easier display. You can use, say, these nice buttons to also change it and to identify yourself. And the buttons on the bottom, do they work? No, really, they don't do anything. So that's, let's say, a pity, but hey, it's not there. Enough talked. Let's go back to this part, because this is where we can see the trim interrupt. We can alternate stable trim. We can adjust the trimming. We can say or look at the prop low speed, which we can switch on or off. We can see the throttle, of course, and the flaps over here. So these are nice things which are, let's say, well, in some cases really handy. On the bottom part, we can see some other instruments. Let me see if I can zoom into those. It likely will be very hard. So maybe I need to move it like this and then do it like this with the mouse. Here you can see that we can change the light, or say let's say how strong the lights are. I'm not sure what the right word is, the illumination. And you can change some other settings. Those are likely, let's say for a valid reason, but also here's a warning, right? The PCO operation of the idle detent is prohibited when in flight. You can change the brightness of the display. That was the word I was looking for. So pretty interesting. Besides that, on the throttle, you can see that by default it's set to idle. You can set it to reverse, to MCP, and to take off. Be careful with the aircraft, because as soon as you remove the parking brakes, things will start to happen. And that's something you might not like. Continuing with the rest of the displays, right? Shift 5, so we're at the 5 already, allows you to change these things. You can test the fire test warning. You can do the lamps. You can do the stick pusher. Those are not, I would say, displayed somewhere, but if you press them, you can see that you can test the lights on the displays, and you can say stick pusher. Not sure what it means, but hey, you can do that. Other than that, we've got the master power, which you shouldn't touch. You can see the passenger warnings. You can see the engine settings. If you press Shift 6, you will end up at the autopilot functionality. The autopilot functionality will be covered in a future episode, where you can, for example, change the active mode, like the approach mode, the auto throttle mode, because the aircraft has it, the flight level change option, and of course you can switch on the autopilot or only the flight director if you want it. If you press Shift 7, you will end up at these buttons. And as mentioned, some of these buttons are unique, because these buttons allow you to, for example, say, hey, I want to do something with the fans or something with the electrical system. In the implementation in Flight Simulator 2024, you only have this option, and you can move this leveler, because the remaining buttons are in most cases, I would say, disabled as far as I figured out, as far as you can all see. And Shift 7 is this view, which is kind of an overview. Shift 8, you're looking outside. Shift 9, you're looking to the front. And Shift 0 is not connected to anything. So this is, okay, kind of an overview of the cockpit, right, where we looked at most instruments. But we, of course, didn't look at the most important instrument, and that's also the yoke. So in the yoke, you can have the multiple settings. If we look at this, you can see autopilot disconnect button. You can see you've got some other buttons, right, where you can likely do some trimming or something. We've got the checklist, which also can be controlled using this option. But you can see that most of these options are disabled, right? These buttons are not working. Behind the yoke is the gear and also the ice protection. Super critical. It's the inert is open closed. You can see some other settings which you can do. For example, you can set the ice protection for the propeller. You can switch on the probes. You can say, hey, ice protection either heavy, light or off. You can change the right windshield also. So the windshields are divided in left and right. Besides that, you also see a small plate over here, which is the V's, which stands for the speeds, right? 180 knots. It's hard to say what it says, and 240 knots. And they're also likely documented somewhere. And that's on the official checklist, but it's not over here, right? You can see airspeed, 120 knots. And this is also emergency gear extension, just to, let's say, if you need it. Well, hopefully you don't need it. Other speeds are not really, let's say, displayed very, let's say, clear in the cockpit, as you can see. What do we've got else? Well, nothing, to be honest. So let's see how we can, let's say, bring some life in this aircraft, because we need to plan our flight, for example. So first of all, we're going to go to the navigation light. So the only downside of using this checklist is, of course, that it doesn't show you the nice, let's say, eye icons which you can use. So I'm going to switch on the navigation and the beacon. Then we're going to look at this system to see if we don't see any warnings. In this case, I still see some warnings, but they're not too bad. And can switch on the engine. And once you've done that, you can press the starter. As soon as you switch the starter, you will hear the engine coming up pretty slowly. The ignition one, you don't need to do anything because it's set by default to auto, which is good. And now we can move this display. And now we can see also the propeller is starting to run if you look very closely. And you can see the states here, right? You can see that the starter is on, the ignition is on, and it will say the temperature is climbing from the oil, the temperature is climbing from the exhaustions, the RPMs are running, the NG is increasing. So let's see how this works. Of course, everything is important, but the most important thing is that you need to look at the green arrows. The green arrows are displayed, as you can see. And after that, we can switch on the generator. Generator switch must be set to off. Well, it says here on. So a little bit weird, but I do think it needs to be set to on. In this case, both need to be set to on. And then we can mark it as completed. Now, what you will hear is if you switch on the generators, you will hear more sound from the engines. Maybe you did hear it, maybe not, because the volume of the aircraft is pretty low. That's, by the way, one tip. If you are talking to HC for this aircraft, you might want to use this button to turn down the volume, because what I observed is that it's crazy hard. So you will be, you say, I don't say that you're becoming deaf, but it's, say, pretty loud. And this is, by the way, because we skipped it, is the panel to switch between the communication radios. You can see that the DME buttons are not working, but the navigation, you can listen to the Morse code. Likely I'll cover it in a future video. You can do that. And then we're coming to something important, right? We need to check if everything is correct. So we can say, hey, everything is being checked. We can say checklist is complete, and then we're there at before takeoff. Because then we need to do some things, right? First of all, we need to set the flaps. I can set them to 15 degrees if I want. I can make sure the flight controls are there. And then the inert SAP needs to be switched to on. Now, the difficult thing is that on, right? What's on? Well, the good thing is if you set it to open, then you will see that the inert SAP will light up, which means it's on. So that's the only thing which you need to do. And then, of course, the landing lights and the other lights. Landing lights are here, and then the strobe and the other settings or the other things, you don't need to switch them on, but I want to cover what they mean. Because if you look at the taxi light, if I would go outside the aircraft, let me do that. That might be a little bit difficult to see, but this is a taxi light, which I'm pointing to currently. Let's do it like this. Here it is. Now, if I switch it off, then of course it will go off, and you can switch on the other lights. And these other lights are the ones which you currently, it's pretty hard to see, but what they will do is they will switch on over here. Let me go inside and set it to pulse, because then you will likely, it's hard to see. So what normally happens is that these lights over here will start to blink, but according to the manual, you shouldn't touch this one for some reason. I don't know why, but leave it as is, because that's what the manual says. Besides that, of course, you can switch the no smoking on and the seat belts on if you want. And then you're, I would say, almost ready to go, right? Because everything has now been started, but there might be some things which you want to do. For example, you want to disconnect the external power because you don't need it anymore. And by default, the fuel pumps are set to auto, right? So that's why I didn't need to touch it. So now the aircraft has powered on, we can look at the display on the center, which is this one. And it's pretty interesting because this one has a lot of options. The first thing you can do is check the init, where you need to make sure that the navigation database is correct, but you can also look at the time and your position. You can update it even if the button is active. You can look at the SW, the identifier, set up your flight ID. And if you do that, make sure that you enter this option. And that's where I also figured out that it doesn't work always for some reason. I'm not sure why. Might be something which I need to work on. And then once you've done that, right, you can go to this part. And this part allows you to set up your destination and your origin. What I observed is that you sometimes need to click a few times because it doesn't work. LFLG. So we're going to set this one, and then don't hit tab because that will bring you to this one, to the EFB. And then you can select the destination, right? So I can zoom into this one to show you where I am currently at. Yeah, for some reason it doesn't show up where I'm currently, because it doesn't show the ICAO code. Even if I zoom in like this, it doesn't show it. Not sure why. Probably something which they need to work on. And then I need to define my destination. So what would be a nice destination? Well, if we go to, well, let's take a small airport, not too big one. LFMP. Nice. Yeah, let's do that. Can press LFMP, and then I can say insert. Once I've done that, you can see that the arrows directly signed, and you can press activate if you want. But there's also options to add additional, in this case, navigates. The easiest way, of course, is to use the EFB to do your flight planning. So for those who watched my previous videos, yes, LFLG, you can do that, of course, of all. And if I set the destination to, what was it? I already forgot it. Too bad. LFMP. Oh. Shift. Oh. And then say, okay, I want to fly using, of course, I need to set it to IFR. That's an option. And then say, hey, I want to make sure that LFMP is correct. LFMP. Let me make sure that I press the airport, and we're going to use the Victor Airways and then say find route. The only reason I'm doing this is that now I have a flight plan, so I can kind of say add it. It makes it easier for me. Not that you shouldn't do it like this, but this is the option which you could use, or say simply using your benefits. So what I want to do is, in this case, you can see that there are multiple waypoints. NetRU is the next one. So what you can do is press the option over here and then use your keyboard to add it and then say enter. Then the next one after NetRU is NISAR. So let's press it and then hit enter. Then Molen, we'll also add it and then hit enter. If you have locations which have multiple weights or multiple parts or multiple, say, matches, then you might need to check your electronic flight bag and then select the correct one, because if you don't select the correct one, then you are between brackets screwed. And I can press insert, and now we should be good to go. What I didn't do, of course, is if I go back to this part, I didn't set the arrival procedure yet. You can do it, but it's not strictly necessary for now. I can press activate, and now the flight plan will be populated. Why did I do it like this? Because I also want to show you the other settings. Because if you press the arrow over here, come on, I can do a few things. Oh, wrong button. So if I press the option over here, I can go to the discontinuity, right, which is on the bottom. I can delete it, but in this case, I don't want to do anything because I want to click on this field, because this allows you to go to multiple views. So in this case, you can see that the speed, distance, and destination is shown. You can also press the view. This will work once you're airborne, the long and latitude, and the route, which currently also doesn't display much. So we'll set it to, in this case, the cross, and I can say, and for some reason this part doesn't go away. Not sure why. In addition to that, you see that you can't save or delete the flight plan, but I think that's normal. And then you can take off with the next one. And the next one allows you to set the runway. So you can say runway SID, so you can look at where you currently are and then set the runway. So for example, I can say, hey, if I go to the EFB, which is always the easiest way, then I can say, hey, I want to depart from runway, well, likely 04, right? That's the one. And you can see that I can say insert, and then it will update the flight plan. Don't forget to hit activate, because we'll make changes. Then this part is the V speeds, right? The speeds, the VR, the VX, the VY, and the VT, and the transition altitude. So I can press send options, and then it will send these, let's say, reference speeds to my other systems. Really useful. Then, of course, for the landing approach, same thing is applicable, because you can select the star, the approach, or the runway. You can select other options over here, but those will be covered in a future video where we looked at, okay, how you can, let's say, fly to the destination airport. The nice thing about this is that it also contains the flight summary, which shows you the average stas, the air distance, the average ground speed, the ground distance, and then also when you're airborne, it shows you the flight time. So it will give you kind of a virtual, let's say, review of your flight. For now, I will leave it like this, and we will go to the top of the screen, which is hard because you can see that currently it doesn't allow me to do because that top bar is in its way. So let me do it like this. Because what you can do here is if you press the aeronautical, you can add additional things. For example, you can show certain airspaces, certain airways. You can add interactions, VORs to the map if you want. If you don't want, then simply accept the default. Besides that, you've got the info button, which I couldn't get to work, but maybe that's me. In addition to that, you can see that you can say, hey, I want to have the constraints for my flight plan, the alternate if you defined one, and the missed approaches. By default, only the missed approach is configured. Geo, not active currently. And then a terrain. You can switch to a dark terrain like this or this. Also depends on what you want. The weather, as mentioned, keep it off until you're airborne. And the TCAS, right, the traffic collision avoidance system. You can see it's currently set on. You can switch on other options if you want the ground traffic, the flight ID, but for now we'll leave it like this. On the right side you'll see some other buttons like center AC, center to waypoint, which will select to the waypoint, center AC, focus on the aircraft, skip waypoint, recall waypoint, nearest, and nearest will show you the nearest airport in this case, and then you can divert to. You can switch on the VSD, and that will show you like this. So this, I would say, I think it's a view of the mountains which are there. And then it shows you also the altitude. It's really cool, and I will show it once we're airborne because then it makes more sense. And in addition to that, you've got this view. And this view simply are the charts for your airport, depending on the airport which you select. Right? If I select LFMP, it could be in some case that there's no map available. In some other parts, you can see that there are maps available, and you can say, hey, I want to, for example, know ILS, what is it, ILS or LOC 33. Then I can press the option, and then I can have a live view of the map. It might be a little bit, let's say, hard to see, but this is the view of the map, which you can then have, let's say, inside the aircraft. You can always use the zoom options over here. Let me do that. You can say, if you press the mouse button, you can move around, so you can, let's say, investigate your destination. You can say fit chart, you can say center chart, and then once you're happy, you can of course close the card. But hey, that's up to you. In addition to that, you can see that you've got also the other maps, depending on if they're available. You simply need to press over here, chart selected, it will show you the available charts. In some scenarios, you might want to switch to FAA, which shows a different set of cards or charts. Sorry, yeah, I would say not be, careful, but make sure that you're using the correct charts, which are there for you. So in this case, hey, I can say, hey, I want to see this this map, and let's hit enter then, and then I will see this. Now the question is, of course, how do you return? Well, that's kind of easy because you press the map and that will return you to this view. So you can see that the aircraft is currently running. Everybody's happy. Flaps are set to default, so I can change it again. Yes, I needed to restart the recording because something went completely wrong. And then we're, I would say, almost good to go, right? So we can take off. But that will, of course, be covered in a future episode of this flight. of this video. So did we miss something? I don't think we missed something. I think we covered most of it. In the next video, we will simply take off the aircraft and then use these nice buttons, which are from the autopilot, to fly to our destination. And we'll of course also, I'd say, look at certain, say, meters which are over here, or I'd say other things which are super interesting during the flight, because now when standing here, nothing really happens, right? We can see that the temperature is still, say, the outside temperature is pretty low. We can see the FF, the fuel flow, which is, I would say, kind of stable. We can see the torque and temperature. This is what we need to look at when we're, of course, taking off, because that's an important thing. For now, we're at the end of this video. So the screens are configured, the flight plan is configured, the engine is humming, and the ACE system is ready to guide us to a destination. But being ready to go and actually going are two different things. So next week we're taking this 1200 horsepower beast to the runway. We'll talk about the push of the takeoff, the unique rudder requirements of a high torque single engine aircraft, and how to transition into clean climb. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you back next week.